Hello, hello, hello. Thank you for joining my stream, everyone. Good evening to you all. For those who don't know me, my name is Zebulon Featherly, and I am running as an independent for U.S. House of Representatives in Michigan's 1st District. If you have any questions while I'm speaking, feel free to post them in chat. If you have any comments, post them there. I will get to them as I can. And in the meantime, I'll be discussing the subject of the night, which is education. Specifically, we're going to be talking about public education tonight. We could go into private education if you'd like, but I haven't done a ton of research on it, so my knowledge is a little bit less in that regard. So let's get to it. First thing I want to talk about is the funding within public education, how it is currently. I have quite a few people that I know personally that are teachers, one of them being my sister. She taught 2nd grade for a few years and is now she's been a teacher for 15 years. And she's taught 2nd grade and is currently teaching preschool, I believe. And so let's get to funding. All of the teachers that I've talked with have agreed that funding is a very big issue for them within their communities. Federal funding really only makes up around 8 to 10% of K through 12 spending, and it's primarily used on Title I, which is low-income schools, special education, which is IDEA, and then school meals and other targeted programs. The federal spending does not cover any general operations of any sort. And the rest of the funding, other than the 8 to 10%, is coming from local property taxes and state revenue. So if you live in an area that has very high-end homes with, making more in property taxes, you're going to end up with better funded schools. And if you're living in an area that don't have as high-end of homes, you're going to end up with schools that are maybe not as well funded. So their schools are underfunded, and that can cause some major issues. Some consequences for underfunding is schools being forced to lay off their teachers, which is a reduction in force for them. It's not something they obviously choose to do, but if you don't have the funding to, retain your teachers and keep them around, then you have to do what you must. And unfortunately, that impacts the students as well as the teachers that remain. It can increase class sizes, and it's not uncommon that you'll end up finding classes that are 30 plus students, which is unsustainable. What my sister was saying is that the ideal ratio of student to teacher is about 10 to 1. You only want up to 10 students per adult that you have. So Underfunding also impacts the ability to hire and retain substitute teachers. And when you don't have substitute teachers at hand, you are forced to either, like if a teacher is sick, you are forced to split that class in among the other remaining classes, which just pushes the burden onto the remaining teachers again. And so burnout is another thing that is very common within the teaching community. Teacher shortages are especially common in inner cities and high need districts, because again, the funding just isn't there to keep to retain those teachers. Another thing that ends up happening is that teachers have to pay out of pocket for supplies, which, in my opinion, that punishes passion more than anything. One of my favorite things when I was growing up is when a teacher would, create their own projects, bring their own projects in to show us. And I know that definitely made me feel more engaged when I was in school. And it really makes the experience of going to school a lot better for most people. What my position is, what I would love to see is the federal floor to be increased. So right now we're sitting at 8 to 10%. I'd love to see it increase to 20 to 30%. And that would just be a funding increase. It would not have any sort of impact on how the schools are run or what is taught. It would just be basically guaranteeing the core supports, which I would say is school meals, teacher training, mental health services, and special education, as well as other things. I really feel like those core items are what I feel are very important within a learning environment, because you can't learn while you're hungry. You don't learn well if you're depressed, and you don't learn well if the teachers aren't trained well. And so that the federal spending increase would be directed in guaranteeing those items, and then once those fundamentals are met, the school would retain flexibility to allocate the remaining funds how they best see fit. I truly do think that a lot of schools are very capable in knowing what they need to best increase their learning and to create an environment that really nourishes the children's abilities to learn. And so, that federal spending increase would be my first thing that I would look towards, I think. Let's see here. I want to talk about teacher workforce and class size a little bit as well. So I already talked a little bit about this, how when a teacher is absent, classes can end up being combined. Budget cuts lead to role reductions and high turnover. I see a question in the chat. How do you feel about tuition assistance for private school attendance? See, this is a subject that I haven't researched super well. Private schools, I don't know a ton about, but I have researched it a little bit, and I've talked with someone who works in a charter school. And it really doesn't seem like it makes sense that we are helping fund private schools when the whole point of their existence is to kind of be separate from the public school system. So I think I'll definitely need to look further into that to kind of solidify where I stand on it. If you have more information, feel free to post that in the chat. I'd love to take a look at it. Or even where you stand on the issue. I'd love to see that as well. Okay, so another downside of budget cuts turning into teachers getting let go, right? A friend of mine that I know works in the charter school just over the winter had 6 of her coworkers be let go due to budget cuts. They didn't have enough money to afford all of the teachers, so they had to let some of them go. And I think that puts a lot of strain on the teachers themselves, especially when a lot of schools, the teachers are expected to act not only as educators, but as counselors and therapists, social workers, and crisis problem solvers. You know, there's some teachers that even have additional jobs to make ends meet. And there's, I was told about some public professional communities that one of the most common topics brought up is the sense of burnout and financial stress that they're going through. So I really do want to be able to ensure that public schools have, you know, other resources available. So, you know, so that teachers aren't required to be, you know, a social worker and a therapist as well as everything else. When I was in high school, we had a student counselor, and I never really felt like I understood what her role was. Like, now that I'm older, I know I have a sense of what I feel like her role should be, but I never really felt like she filled that. You know, I had a lot of friends in high school that were very depressed. They were bullied outside of school. I even had there's a lot of people who would have benefited greatly from a professional mental health worker being in that situation. But, you know, we just didn't have that available. So I think I would love to see that become a thing. And then that kind of rolls into mental health. Well, you know, with social media, actually, before I get into this topic, there's another comment. Unless the assistance is enough to cover the whole cost of private schools, it is giving subsidies to people who can already afford a very expensive education that leaves out poor kids. Yeah, I completely agree. If a school is not if a school does not require more funding, then I've never been a fan of the idea that you have to use all of the funding you have access to. I think that's a poor system. And I think the system kind of punishes you if you don't utilize the entire funding that you get in some situations. Like, I know I've heard in some areas where if you don't use the entire budget, your budget will be cut for the next year. And so it kind of punishes you for, being efficient, which seems backwards from what we would want. And I think if we can somehow incentivize the ability to be efficient within creating these systems, I think that would also be very helpful. Yeah. Private schools is a tough subject. I personally am not a fan of our tax money going towards funding private schools. I think we should focus on public schools the most, and if private schools cannot fund themselves, then I think they should maybe just convert into a public school. I don't know. I'm not very well versed in that area, but I think public schools should be our focus. Okay. Back to mental health. So, student counselors, often overburdened or unavailable, or maybe just not very great at their job. I don't know. At least that's what it felt like in my school. Not that she didn't do a great job, but there's still plenty of people that I knew struggled a lot growing up. And especially in the day, today's age where social media is a huge impact on how we see the world. And then, of course, we have AI entering the scene as well. That's entirely its own subject, in my opinion, and I'll get to it a little bit more later. But social media and AI, they both have high impact on our self-image and how we see ourselves within the world. So I think being able to prepare kids for that and have resources to deal with those situations is very important. One of the teachers I spoke with, in regards to physical safety, was threatened by a student. Was threatened that they were going to shoot her when they came to school. And gun violence in schools is a huge problem right now in this country. And I think we need to really take a closer look at that and take a look at preventative mental health support, earlier intervention, and then, supportive school environments. We need school leadership that is able to take those situations and be able to turn them into something that isn't a health risk for everyone involved. And whether that looks like crisis handling, like training, or if it looks like metal detectors in schools. I know that's already implemented in some schools. I think we should just take a look at our options and really try and figure out what would be a good next step for us in, preventing these threats and actions that are happening all across our nation. One thing that's kind of in the similar line that I feel like it could potentially help with those situations, mentorship programs, right? Big brother, big sister. It's one of the teachers I've talked with said that her school implemented that in, I think, middle school, and it drastically improved behavior as well as student engagement. And I think, we don't have to put all of the responsibility onto the teachers. I think it's a great way to, mentorship programs are a great way to, encourage leadership growth within our youth. And it's a great way to make, create bonds in between younger and older students. A lot of the times when I was in school, I had basically zero contact with any of my older students or older classmen and younger classmen. I do feel like I would have enjoyed taking part in a mentorship program. I think it would have helped me socially as well as, just being more comfortable at school. So I think that's one program that I think could easily be implemented a lot more. Another comment, would you consider propositions to audit school district budgeting to examine current spending patterns with the purpose of identifying excess spending on programs such as athletics? Let's see. Audit school district budgeting to examine current spending patterns. Yeah, honestly, I feel like that type of thing should already be in place. I haven't really looked into what is available currently for us to audit schools, but I absolutely agree. I think especially if we increase the federal funding for these public schools, I think that audits would be necessary to basically ensure that, there's not high ups in the school that are abusing the extra funding. Okay, so the school that I was a board member for does yearly independent audits. That's cool. So it definitely seems like there are schools out there that do it, but maybe, who's to say that all the schools do it? I would definitely be on board with, requiring an audit for schools like that. I don't know how much of an issue it is or not, but I do feel like a majority of schools are fairly responsible with their funding, but I'm sure audits would not hurt the situation. Let's see here. Now let's move towards kind of the different state differences and testing and standardized testing and accountability. right now, I know Michigan is Michigan uses Common Core aligned state standards, whereas other states like Indiana use a slightly different system. It's not Common Core, but I think it was said to be somewhat similar. And I do know that a lot of states use Common Core to basically set their standards. And I feel like our current system is set up in a way that really focuses on the student's ability to get grades on these tests. And I think I feel like it's the wrong way to look at the situation. Because what these tests are for is to evaluate the school's ability to teach a student. It's not evaluating the student's ability to take a test. Right? These systems are there so that we know if a school is not doing well in teaching a certain subject, right? If a majority of the students in one school is doing super well, has great grades, and then another school somewhere else, majority of the students have worse grades on these tests, that's not the outcome. It's not the outcome of the students. It's the outcome of how well the teachers and the schools run. In order to, maybe the learning environment isn't great. Maybe they don't have funding for resources, books, pens, paper. There's so many factors into teaching kids that I feel like these standardized tests should really be used as a method to see which schools we need to focus on more, and maybe we send an expert there who knows a lot about how to get a school running well. I think our focus is shifted from where it should be. Next, let's go ahead and talk about AI and technology. Growing up, loved technology, and right now I love AI. I have a healthy respect for the dangers that it could potentially bring up, but overall I do think technology and AI is a good thing and can be a useful tool. However, if you do not understand the technology well and you don't know how to incorporate it well, there is a very good chance that instead of helping you teach a class, it can hinder you in being able to teach. I think the world is changing so fast, especially with the addition of AI, but even with just having access to technology on hand, almost every kid now has a smartphone. Almost every adult has access to a computer in your pocket, right? So the way we teach and what we teach has to shift and it has to be able to keep up with the changing world that we are living in. I think AI is a great example for this because there's a lot of concern right now within classrooms about how AI is going to impact teaching. Because if you give me a worksheet to take home, I can take it home, pull out my phone, take a photo of the paper and say, fill out these questions for me. And early in AI's life, it was easier to tell whether or not kids were using AI to fill out spreadsheets, to write papers, to do whatever they're doing outside of in class, right? And so, but nowadays it's not nearly as easy. It's becoming harder and harder to tell what is AI and what is not. There's too many videos on social media that the only reason I know they're AI is because they do something outlandish to basically prove that it is AI. But if companies want to hide whether something is AI or not, they have no issue and no difficulty doing so. So I think we have to come at this, issue at a different angle. Instead of hiding AI and instead of keeping it out of the classrooms as much as possible, I think teaching kids how to best use it and how to use it responsibly is going to be the biggest challenge that we have coming up. Because AI can be a great tool. It can help you proofread something. It can help you come up with ideas. There's so many things that it can do if used correctly to, improve your ability to just exist. And so I really want to put more emphasis on researching on researching how to best incorporate technology and AI within our areas of learning. I think it'll be difficult, but it's absolutely doable. Sorry. Another thing I want to focus on is leadership, right? I would love to see some higher standards for our leadership within the educational field. I kept hearing 3 years tossed around a lot. People would teach in a classroom for 3 years before moving on to a different, what they actually wanted to do. And I think that if you are wanting to have a higher leadership role within the educational field, you need to have maybe even up to 10 years of classroom experience. Those who have a lot of power need to understand what that power is designed to be used for. And whether that's education or public health, I think having that experience is necessary to do the best job that you're going to be able to do. So I would love to see, I think what I'm going to look for a lot if I'm to be a representative for this county, I'm going to require advisors for every subject. I've reached out to a few of my old teachers to kind of hopefully open a line of communication, as well as I have some other contacts as well that I'm looking forward to discussing some of these subjects with. And I think it's really important to have connections with people who understand the field better than anyone else will. So I'm really looking forward to that on a personal level. Okay. So before I start wrapping it up, does anyone have any further questions? Are there any further comments? Would anyone like to bring up anything else, whether it be about AI? I know I didn't really get into higher education yet. Let's see, I got a comment here. One response to the teacher to student ratio problem often explored in Montessori schools is the use of mixed age classroom to foster mentorship among students. Interesting. I have not looked into that. No, I honestly haven't even heard of that before. But interesting. Mixed age within the classroom. Yeah, because I could definitely see that becoming... I mean, that's kind of what they do in some college level courses where you'll have student aides that are, higher, like students that have been there longer, helping out with things within the classroom. So I guess I kind of had heard of it, but I haven't looked super deeply into it. That is interesting. I guess I don't see that working super well within, say, high school or middle school, because you're kind of on the same schedules. So I feel like it'd be hard to really incorporate that. But I guess I'll have to look into it a little bit more. That is interesting, though. Definitely looking forward to learning more about that. Again, I didn't get super into higher education. My personal stance is that I think that it would benefit us a lot to have a right now, without getting super deep into the research yet, I have a loose opinion of being for free higher education. Right? That would basically say that all tuition, probably not housing or anything, but tuition itself would be free for anyone who desired it. I do need to look deeper into that issue because I know it's a very important issue and a very sensitive issue, and I think it really requires time and thought put into it. But I am definitely leaning more towards the idea of basically more education is better. And right now having education that is incredibly expensive deters people from trying out new subjects and maybe finding the subject that they thrive in. And I feel like we're losing so much potential for, to really unleash people's abilities to learn and to create and to inspire by kind of putting a paywall up for people who want to learn more. Comment came in: to expand funding for education, are there any current budget expenses you would consider reducing? I would love... I do think that I'm going to get into this more next week, Uh, Next week's topic, or sorry, not next week, 2 weeks from now, my next stream, my topic is going to be transparency and government funding, government spending, and I think that will go right in. And I think I'm going to hold off. There are definitely current budget expenses that I would consider reducing. One of them obviously being our current ICE issue we have. I don't like that we are currently increasing the spending there when I don't feel the need to do so. I have a lot of issues with that, and I will likely be bringing that up more next stream. Off the top of my head, there's not really others that I feel comfortable going into depth with without doing some more research. So I'll hold off on adding any others other than, the current border patrol and that whole situation. Okay. So I've talked about grade school, high school, all the different things. I'll just quickly go over what my position was and some of my ideas. So I brought up the idea of increasing the federal floor from 8 to 10% to more like 20 to 30%. That would just be funding. It wouldn't be any control or any sort of input within the school itself. It would just be ensuring that schools have those core supports: school meals, teacher training, mental health services, and special education and other things. And then I brought up mentorship programs. I think we need to look into that more. And I think researching ideas for how to deal with technology and AI within learning environments. And some questions that I will leave you guys with are as follows. What part of our education system feels the most broken to you right now? And how much of a role do you think the government should play in education? And where should that role stop? So, just some questions for you to think about. And I thank everyone who joined my stream. And hopefully I see you all in 2 weeks. I'll be talking about transparency within our government. So, thank you all for joining. Have a great night, everybody.